Today's daf we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf Lamed Aleph. Today's daf is sponsored by Cheryl and Avi Savitsky and family in loving memory of Cheryl's father, Dr. Stephen F. Stein, Shimon Feivish ben Yisrael Yitzchak HaKohen, on his 41st yahrzeit. His simchat chayim was palpable to anyone who met him, and that is something we strive to emulate each and every day. Today's daf is sponsored by Suri Davis in loving memory of her father, Rav Reuven ben Chaim. He loved learning Torah, and particularly the daf. May his neshama have an aliyah. Today's daf is sponsored by Rachel and Oren Seliger in loving memory of Alan Kronish, Avner Yosef ben Zelta Priva of Yehuda Aryeh on his 35th yahrzeit. He made the decision to be a choser b'tshuva, and in turn his children and grandchildren are following in his footsteps. Both of his children learned the daf. He is missed. We're going to get started now with our daf, and we're going to finish the third chapter. And tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem, or today already after class, you can already start the fourth chapter of Sanhedrin. So our topic that we're in the middle of, and we're going to have a few different topics today. First, we're going to talk about the bedikot and the contradiction between testimonies of witnesses when it comes to the bedikot, okay, which are the side points, not, again, the central issues, what day, what time, what person, but we're on the side issues, and then we're differentiating yesterday between certain side issues and other side issues, how side issues they are, and if a contradiction between them would ruin the case. So Rabbi Yehuda first just made a very general statement that if there's a contradiction between in the bedikot, the less important issues, the less central issues, then it's okay for dinim ramonot, implied, but not in capital punishment crimes. And then we had a differentiation, like a debate between Rava and Rav Chisda about what kind of bedikot was he talking about. Was he talking about things like the color of the wallet or the color of the money? It's not exactly clear what this shachor and lavan is. There's different opinions. It could be it's old coins and new coins. It could be, which again are really worth the same. It's just different. It's again about their testimony, or it could be about how much more there's more silver in it, more different. I don't know. It's unclear, but it seemed to have the same value either which way. So then Rav Chisda said, but that doesn't make any sense. In other words, Rava had said, if it's maneh shachor maneh lavan, that's important because that's the money that we're talking about. And if there's a differentiation in terms of what they're saying there, a discrepancy, we're not going to accept that. Rav Chisda said, what are you talking about? Forget they said, but not the arnak, right? And then he said, well, if you're going to say the money is an issue, you're going to say the difference between maneh shachor and maneh lavan is a problem. That means, right, in a case of the dinei nefashot, we say kelav shchorim, kelav lavanim. That's okay. So now we have a problem. We say, okay, it's not a problem. We have a debate between Amoraim about how we view the color of the clothes, the color of, right? Is that an issue? Is that not an issue? So now we get to Nehardea, starting at the top of our daf. Nehardea amri. Afilu echad omer maneh shachor, echad omer maneh lavan, mitzdarf. Okay, so now we have this opinion. Maneh shachor, maneh lavan, you can combine them. It's not even a problem. Okay, whereas in the previous, right, everybody said maneh shachor, maneh lavan was an issue. And the debate they have is really about the wallet color, right? And was that an issue or not an issue? But the issue about the maneh shachor, maneh lavan, that already is everyone thought for sure it's a problem. Now, Nehardea say, no, even that's not a problem. So now we have to figure out, according to who did they hold? Kiman, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. They're going to connect this back to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. Perhaps that's why we got here in the first place. What did Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha say? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha said, if one says the loan happened on Monday and one says the loan happened on Sunday, right? They didn't see it at the same time. Or, they didn't see each other, or, right? Different ways that we might understand. But if that's the case, and they could differ about the day in which they saw it, then obviously they could differ about maneh shachor, maneh lavan, right? What color the money was. Because as long as in the end they both say he owes $100, what's the difference if it was dollars that look like this or dollars that look like that? Or what's the difference if it was Sunday or Monday that the loan took place? Right? And again, the loan taking place, we assume that meant there were two different loans, but either which way, the person owes 100. To which they say, Rabbi Shimon ben Karcha, but the Rabbi Shimon and Karcha is all good and fine as long as they don't contradict each other. In other words, when those two witnesses come and one says it happened on Sunday, one says it happened on Monday, that's not a contradiction. That's just each one is testifying that the person loaned money, right, to someone else. to that same person on a different day. But they're each basically saying the debtor owes the creditor $100. The same, right? But they know, first of all, they're not talking about the same case. They're not contradicting each other. They're each just bringing a different proof that this person owes $100. But these two people are talking about the loan happening on the same day, and then their details don't work out with each other. That's a whole different story. Rabbi Yehoshua and Karcha would not agree in that case because this just lowers the credibility of these witnesses. As soon as something in their story doesn't jive, it's a problem. The two said Sunday, Monday. It wasn't like they were both trying to say we're talking about the same loan. They weren't talking about the same loan. They were talking about the same two people and the same person who owes money to someone else. And they weren't trying to say we're talking about the same story and just didn't get the details right. So that is not the same thing. Ella. Okay, so we have to find someone else. Hu Amar ki Tana de Tanya. You must hold like the following Tana. Who's that going to be? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. So often we have this, and in fact, we've seen this with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar before, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar often comes, and other people as well. We have an earlier machloket, like Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel. This happens often with them. And then there's a deliberation at later generations, what Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai were actually debating. So that's what we have here. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar disagrees with someone else and says, Lo nechleku Beit Shammai u'Beit Hillel al shtei kitei edim. They're not arguing. In the case where there's two groups of two witnesses in each group, she'achad omeret matayim ve'achad omeret maneh. Two witnesses say the borrower owes back 200 maneh, 200 zuz. And the other group of witnesses says the debtor owes 100. Sheyesh b'chlal matayim maneh. So you have two witnesses that say 100, two witnesses that say 200. Either which way, you have two witnesses that say at least 100, right? And 100 is within 200. 200 is basically 100 and another 100. So in that case, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel all agree. If there's two witnesses say that, two witnesses say that, for sure, you can make the person pay 100 zuz. But what's the machlokah Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel? Now remember, we always hold like Beit Hillel. Al katechat. Their debate is, what if there's one group of witnesses and one says 100 and one says 200? Now that's very similar to our case because there's a difference, right? They contradict each other. It's not like one's talking about Sunday, one's talking about Monday. They're talking about the same loan. Question is, was the loan 100, was the loan 200? So Beit Shammai Omrim nechlakai dutam. Beit Shammai Omrim says contradiction. Can't accept it. Beit Hillel Omrim yesh bechlal matayim maneh. Beit Hillel says 100 is also included in 200. 200, it basically also includes 100. And therefore, we don't care if there's a contradiction. This is exactly what we saw from Nehardea. It doesn't matter if you got it wrong, which maneh, was it a maneh shachor, maneh lavan, black or white. In the end, everyone agrees you owe a maneh. So it doesn't matter whether it was black or whether it was white. It doesn't matter if their their testimony contradicts. That's clear in Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That according to Beit Hillel, it doesn't matter if they contradict, as long as everyone's in agreement about something, the least common denominator, in that case anyway, right? At least 100 there was agreement about, we can make them pay 100. So that was the opinion of Nehardea that we saw that went against what we saw previously, which was both Rava and Rav Chisda thought that if you have a difference of opinion about maneh shachor, maneh lavan, it's going to be a problem, right? They had a debate really about the arnaki shchora and arnaki levana, because again, what happened? Rava said Arnaki Shchora, Arnaki Levana is accepted. But that means it's not in Dinei Nefashot, and that's something that they thought in Dinei Nefashot, right? Rav Chisda said, what do you mean? In Dinei Nefashot, we do accept that even. So that can't be. Okay, so that was their discussion. But everyone thought maneh shachor, maneh lavan is a problem. But Nehardea had a different opinion, and they held by this Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Now we're going to have another case and try to see, do we hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar here? So now we have an issue. Somebody owes someone else, or somebody, perhaps he was watching, whatever it is, a chavit of yayin or a chavit of shemen. So we have one who says it was a barrel of wine that the person has to give back to the other person. And one said it was a barrel of oil. Now, just to point out, in those days, oil was worth more than wine. Hava uvda va'atu l'kamei de Rabbi Abba. So there's this debate, and one witness says it was a barrel of wine. One witness said it was a barrel of oil. That's a contradiction in the base item, right? Well, Rabbi Ami said this is like the manamatayim, it sounds like, because within a barrel of wine, right, within a barrel of oil, you also have a barrel of wine. Meaning, right, if a barrel of wine is worth 100 and a barrel of oil is worth 120, so we can at least make him pay back a barrel of wine because even if one said oil, at least within oil, you can include wine. At least so it seems. We're going to question this in a second. But they said, so when Rabbi Ami obligated the person to return at least the barrel of wine, came on, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. But why? This isn't Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, you could say that 100 is part of 200, but you can't say a barrel of wine is part of a barrel of oil, right? That the barrel of oil includes a barrel of wine. Oil doesn't include wine. Those are two different things. So, Ki agav nami amar, did he say it here? To which the answer is lo tzricha lidmei. The case you must have gotten wrong because there's no way he could paskin that way. This is a clear contradiction. And was it wine? Was it oil? You can't say, oh, well, since oil is worth more, then the wine is included in the oil and at least make it, everyone at least agreed to the least common denominator of wine. It's not true. So it must be the case was that one witness said he owed the value of a barrel of wine, and the other one said he owed a barrel of the value of a barrel of oil. And then you can say, because it's all in value, the value of one could be included in the other, but you can't say it the reverse. You can't say it if it was actually talking about wine and oil, then it wouldn't work, and there's no way you could have obligated. That would be a clear contradiction, and the details between the witnesses were have contradictory evidence. Echad Omer, one last case here before we move on. Echad Omer b'juta ha'elyona, Echad Omer b'juta ha'tachtona. It was a debate about where the loan took place. One said it took place upstairs, one said it took place downstairs. Amar Rabbi Chanina ma'aseh ba'al lifnei Rebbe v'tziref edutan. This is about the fact that where it happened is not a critical detail in the story. And we're not expecting the witnesses to have remembered exactly, was it upstairs, downstairs, and therefore if the evidence doesn't work out, it's fine. Okay? If there's a contradictory evidence there, again, when it comes to dine mamono, okay, probably unlikely they would accept this in a capital case. Now we're back to the end of the Mishnah. The Mishnah had discussed this issue of two people say zakai, one person says chayav, and then the person comes out of court and says, what can I do? I really wanted to say zakai, but my friends disagreed with me and blah, blah, blah. And you're not allowed to do that because it's what we call richilut. It's not nice to go around and saying who did what and also perhaps bad-mouthing them that, now the litigant is going to get angry at those other judges for ruling against him. So now they're going to bring a brayta that's exactly like the Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan, minayin lechashi yetzeh lo yomar hareini mizakeh v'chaverai mechayvim. Don't go out of court and say, listen, I thought you should be innocent, and my friend said not. I said, but what can I do? Because they were more than me. Talmud Lamar, lo telech rachil ba'amecha, va'omer holech rachil magalas sod. Here they quote two psukim, don't go rachil, don't go spreading, saying lots of things about other people, and holech rachil magalas sod, someone who, connects between someone who does rechilut includes also revealing secrets. Now, this didn't really add anything to the Mishnah, but you might remember that in the Mishnah it says, there were parentheses around the first pasuk, and it said perhaps it wasn't clear if our Mishnah had two pasukim or just one pasuk. This is a clear proof, or a pretty clear proof, that the version of our Mishnah was wrong with the two psukim, because otherwise the Braita matches the Mishnah exactly. So it must mean the Braita had two psukim and the Mishnah only had the one pasuk about the secret. Okay, I'm just going to remind you what rechilut is. It's not lashon hara. It's not when you say bad things about people. It's just when you talk about people and you gossip about them in a way that you go around and say, oh, this person's up to blah, blah, blah. And you're just saying things about people for no real reason, or maybe even for a bad reason. But it's really usually not from a bad place. It's just saying things you shouldn't be saying. And that leads us into this revealing secrets. And we have an interesting story. Talmida. There was a student in the Beit Midrash. People were talking about him. That he revealed something that was said in the Beit Midrash 22 years ago. Okay, I have kids in the army who can't talk about a lot of things they do in the army, and this is like a huge conversation in our house all the time about what you can say, what you can't say, and maybe one time in your life you'll be able to tell me. They're all like, no, never, there's no way you'll ever know what we do. And that kind of thing. And apparently the Beit Midrash was no different. Okay, I don't know if they sign people like they do in the army, but you're not allowed to reveal things that go on in the Beit Midrash. What exactly this is referring to is a very good question. Like, what kind of things in the Beit Midrash are secret? And we're going to come back to this because we're going to talk about how transparent the courts are supposed to be. The topic of Alana Steinheim this week in Din and Daf, a super interesting topic. And here it seems like he did reveal something that was clearly not supposed to be revealed. And you'll see why in a second. Avke Rav Ami Beit Midrash. Rav Ami kicked him out of the Beit Midrash for doing this. Amar Din Gali Razia. This person is a secret, reveals secrets, and out of here. We don't want you in the Beit Midrash because who knows what you're going to say. Okay, so again, it leaves open a big question. What exactly was this that was said in the Beit Midrash? It was such a big secret. Could be like, who had what opinion? First of all, we're reading all the time recordings of the Beit Midrash, so it's interesting. But anyway, it raises some questions, but they wanted to show how when you're not supposed to reveal a secret and you do even 22 years later, right, it's considered, again, this back to this verse of Holech Rachil Megales Sod, that someone who reveals a secret is really considered someone who engaged in Rechilut, and it's really a problem to say things you shouldn't be saying. Okay, next Mishnah. This is a very interesting Mishnah. There's 4 parts to it. It's a very, on the one hand, very organized and clear Mishnah. On the other hand, we're going to see from the Gemara that as much as things try to seem to be black and white here, and even in the Gemara, they're going to have clear piskei halacha here, there's going to be an agenda here to show that it's really not as clear cut as you think it is, okay? And the things are not as black and white as one can try to make them sound, okay? So with that intro, let's go to the Mishnah. Kozman shemivi ra'aya soter tadin. Anytime you want to bring a proof, you can contradict the law. Now, what does this mean exactly? You can override the law. What it means is that, well, again, I can't really say what it means because there's a bunch of different interpretations, but it sounds like what it means is if you're in court and they rule against you, and then you find proof later, you can bring proof later and change the ruling. Even after. Now, soter tadin, it sounds like it's already been done. Okay, right, like overturn the verdict, something like that. Safrai in Mishnat Eretz Yisrael actually understands this very differently. He says you can contradict, you can overturn the law, the ruling before it's ruled. Okay, I don't know how he understands overturn the rule, soter tadin, it sounds like it's already been decided. But that, and the reason why I think Safrai is motivated to claim this is all before everything's decided is because it's hard to read this first line with the second line, okay? And you'll see the problem immediately. So the first one sounds like you can always bring a proof and change, right? If you have a proof later on, you can change. And maybe even it's like an intro to this whole Mishnah, because this Mishnah is going to actually start saying not always, okay? So example number 1 is going to be Amrulo, Kol rayot sheyesh l'havei mikam va'ad 30 yom. Now here, if you look in the general translations and you look in the Koran, there's also a difference here. Who said? If somebody says, now someone says it's the Koran reads it actually as the litigant. The other litigant says all you have is 30 days. I don't know how a litigant could limit you to how long the other side could bring a proof. That's a very strange interpretation. Rashi says, or I think it's Rashi, if Rashi specifically says it, or no, it's not Rashi, but the general way to understand this is that the court says, if the court puts a date on it, now that doesn't make sense. If we just said a minute ago that there's no statute of limitations and you can always bring a proof, then why would the court ever limit it and say you have 30 days? So it also doesn't make sense, which is why Safrai actually has some advantage over these other interpretations, even though it doesn't work so well with the word soter tadin. But I'm sorry that I'm confusing you. It's just a really hard Mishnah to teach because it's a very unclear Mishnah. But it sounds like, right, there's regular, until the court is done. Once the court is done, then they can put a limit on it and they can say, now you have up to 30 days. Okay, if there's no statute of limitations, then how could the court limit it? On the other hand, I guess some people think that maybe some cases the court decides to limit it. And if the court limits it, so then if you have up to 30 days, now we're going to have a machloka. We have 2 machlokot in this mission between the rabbis and Rabbi Shimon and Gamliel. It's very famous. We actually learned it already not so long ago in Baba Batra at the end, and we also learned it in Gittin, but you'll see in a minute why. Matzah b'toch 30 yom soter. La'achar 30 yom no soter. So if the court gave a limit, let's assume it's the court and not the litigant, the court gave a limit of 30 days, and you find it after 30 days, you find some proof, tough luck. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Maya says this, Shalom Matzah B'toch Shloshim, Matzah Lachar Shloshim. That's totally unfair, right? Why should we limit you? In other words, just because they put a limitation, but you didn't have the proof. All of a sudden now you found a proof. What, we're not going to let you? And that's basically going back to the first statement. If there's no statute of limitations, there's no statute of limitations. Why should we limit you just because they put a limit of 30 days? So now the question becomes here. Now, I want you to think about what's motivating Tanakam, because Rashbag really has good logic here. But the issue is really here believability. We don't think you're such an honest person. We gave you a limit. You didn't find it. Well, how did you all of a sudden find testimony that you didn't find before? Right? So this already makes you less believable, because if you get it, on day 31, you show up. Well, what do you mean? Why didn't you show up yesterday? Why didn't you show up a month ago? You should have taken care of it earlier. And the fact that you didn't makes us suspicious that you just maybe finally convinced someone to lie for you. Okay? And that's really what Chachamim were worried about. Third case, Amar lo have edim, va'amar ein li edim. Now, in the first case, he didn't say, I don't have witnesses. And perhaps some people say that the reason why the court, okay, assuming it's the court who says, bring any proof, you have 30 days, it could be the person said, I have proof. I just can't, I have witnesses, I just can't find them. Or I know there's, some proof out there, I just can't find it right now. And then they say, fine, you have 30 days. But if the person says, I don't have any proof, I don't have any witnesses, so then, Amar lo have edim, v'amar ein li edim. He says, have raya, they say, bring a proof, Amar ein li raya, I don't have. Ula achar zman hevi raya, u'matzah edim. And then later, they find, hareze eno klum. Okay, now, at this point, we don't believe the person, because they said, I have no proof. And then all of a sudden, they found a proof. That doesn't make any sense. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, what do you mean? Maya says lo yodea sheyesh lo edim u'matzah edim. Lo yodea sheyesh lo raya u'matzah raya. Rashbag, again, is on the side of the litigant and says, but what if the person didn't know he had witnesses? The person didn't know, right? And now they find someone. So basically, we have this struggle between the rabbis who are basically saying, we're very suspect in all these situations. You had 30 days, you didn't bring. You said, I don't have witnesses, and now all of a sudden you do. We don't believe you. And Rashbag, who says many times you might end up in a situation where you just didn't know that you had proof. You didn't know you had witnesses, and then you do. So those are the two debates between them, okay? And then we're going to go to case number 4, where they don't actually debate. Now, if you see that they're going to obligate you in they're about to rule against you, Va'amar kirvu ploni uploni v'yidunu, and all of a sudden you say, wait, I have witnesses. Oh, wait. Osho tzi raya mitachat pundato, pulls out from under his belt a shovar, a kabbalah, a receipt that says I paid. Well, in that case, hareza ain't no clue. Everyone agrees that already looks suspicious. Okay, in other words, if you say, "Oh yeah, I have witnesses," you see they're about to give. Wait, I have witnesses right here. In that, now again, why is this different than the previous, where you said I don't have witnesses, and then all of a sudden you found? It seems like, again, it's not exactly clear cut, but this is a way where it seems very clear. All of a sudden you say, oh, wait, you see those guys in the room here? They're willing to testify for me. It's like as if what? He set them up that only if I'm stuck, you'll lie falsely for me, and then pulls out the piece of evidence that he hasn't shown anyone until now. So that already, even Rashbag agrees, this looks very suspicious. So now the Gemara, as I said, is going to be very clear cut. Okay, so we have sort of a clear cut mission where they give boundaries, but we have machlokot debates about it. And again, it's very unclear because, like I saw someone writing in the chat, and we'll get to this later about, what if witnesses come from abroad, and we're going to see that later. Okay, so anyway, I'm a Rabbi Funa halacha Rashbag. Okay, now we're on the first debate between them, which is the case where they give you 30 days, and then you find only after 30 days, and you bring it after 30 days, and Rashbag said, of course, we're going to allow this, and in fact, we paskin like Rashbag, according to Rabbi Barafuna. And Amar Barafuna, he also was quoted as saying, we don't hold like the rabbis. So Pshita, okay, that was a ridiculous thing to say. Once you say Alachak Rashbag, we obviously know you don't hold like Chachamim who disagree with Rashbag, to which the Gemara says, why did he say both? You might have thought. So you might have thought that maybe that's only ideally. But if the court already, let's say the case happened, they gave you 30 days, you didn't bring it within 30 days. Then day 50, you bring witnesses and they rule like the rabbis and they say, we don't accept your witnesses. And then they close the judgment again. You might have thought, well, it's too late. They've closed the judgment. They've already done it. But no, you don't hold like the rabbis at all. So if they did that to you, we open up the ruling again and we undo it. Okay, second case. Amar lo have'edim, Amar Rabban Shimon, Gamliel, etc. Right? What are you gonna do? You said I don't have witnesses, but then you found. So of course we're going to allow that according to Rashbag. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha k'divrei chachamim. In this case, we don't hold like Rashbag. And Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and halacha k'divrei Rashbag. Okay, he said again. Okay, now this time it's the reverse, but he says both the same things. We hold like Rashbag, we don't hold like Chachamim. Pshita. Why are you saying them both? We obviously know if the halacha is like the rabbis, it's not like Rashbag. Now here it's going to be different. He wanted you to know that this is the only place in the Mishnah that we don't hold like Rashbag. Everywhere else Rashbag appears, we hold like him, other than this one Mishnah. And why was it so important for him to point that out? Well, we have a debate between what Rabbi Bar Rav Huna says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan about Rashbag in the Mishnah. What did he say? And this is the line we've seen a bunch of times. Kol makom sheshana Rashbag b'mishnatenu halacha k'moto chutz mi'arev v'tzaydam v'raya achrona. Other than three cases. In other words, according to the first one who said halacha Rashbag and halacha Chachamim, and the halacha is not like Rashbag, wanted to say this is the only place. And someone else quoted Rabbi Yochanan is saying there's three places where we don't hold like Rashbag. One is arev, which is can you take from the guarantor even when the lova has the money to pay, right? There was a whole debate. Or even there was, I won't get into the details, but there were questions about can the guarantor pay back or not? Can you collect from the guarantor? And Rashbag was like, no, you cannot. And Itzdalit, and the Tzaydam is a case with the Itzdalit, where the woman gets a get on condition that she return the husband's Itzdalit, and the Itzdalit gets lost. And the question is, can you return the value of it, or is the get the condition of the get never going to be fulfilled? Okay, so those are the three cases we do not hold like Rashbag. Okay, so that was all about the psika. So like I said, it seems pretty clear cut. We have four cases, two they agree about, right? The first case where you can always just undo the judgment later if there's no limitations having put on. We have case where you said, the court, let's just assume it's the court, instituted a 30-day limit. And then we say, we don't hold by that limit. Okay, you can bring later. That's how we hold, like Rashbag. Then we have, you said yourself, I have no more witnesses. I have no proof. And then later you bring. Will we accept that? No, the answer is. And this case where all of a sudden you pull something out last minute, we also don't believe you according to everybody. So now we're going to have some cases. Ha'u Yanuka, and here we already start getting into, it's not so clear cut. Ha'u Yanuka, there was a child, the Tavu Ladina, meaning an orphan. They put him on trial for his father's money. Before Rav Nachman, Amar le ilach sadeh, so Rav Nachman said, you have witnesses? Amar le lo, he said no. Ilach raya, you have a proof? Amar le lo, he said no. So obviously, chayve Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman made the child pay. The child goes out of court, starts crying. Okay, everybody hears his cries. And Shamuhu Hanachinashe, some people heard, Amrule, you're in a court case because of your father's money? Ani Yadina, we know B'mile Davucha. We have some proof for you. We can testify. Amarav Nachman Baha Filu Rabbana Modu Dianuka B'mile Davua Lo Yada. In this case, we're obviously going to change. So we're not going to, even the rabbis would agree, because the child doesn't know about his father's business. He didn't know how to find witnesses because he didn't know who was involved. It was his father. His father never told him. So in that case, already we see, right, it depends on the situation. Here, it doesn't look like the child was lying. The child just didn't know. And similarly, whoever pointed out before about chutz la'aretz, right, if it were they come from abroad, it's a different story. Okay, we're going to get to that later. Now we have a case of ahi-itita. We have a woman, denafik shtara mitote yada. This is a little bit different. There's a woman, it's just about believability. There's a woman who's holding a shtar. Now, the shtar was between two other people. It was a loan between, Reuven and Shimon, and this woman, Chana, has the shtar in her hand. So, Amrele, Yadana Bahai Shtar de Hava. Now, Reuven was the lender. She says, I know that Reuven got his money back already. Okay, now, The question is, do we believe her? On the other hand, there's the shtar. Usually you rip it up when the shtar is paid. But it's in her hands. Now, the question is she believed? So we're going to have two versions of what Rav Nachman said. Hemne Rav Nachman. He believed her, according to the first version. And in both versions, Rav is going to contradict whatever ruling it is that Rav Nachman gives. Are you holding like Rebbe who says that otiot niknopa misira, that if you pass over a shtar, you're basically giving over the rights of that shtar, which means that if she's holding the shtar in her hand, she basically acquired it, and then she's believed to say whatever she wants to about it because it's in her possession. But we don't hold like Rebbe in otiot niknopa misira. So how could you be holding like Rebbe, basically? Amarle, he says, no, that's not the reason. Shanehacha di bai kalte. If she really didn't want to force Shimon to pay the money to Reuven, instead of coming to court and saying it was already paid back, she could have just burnt the shtar. And if she burns the shtar, Reuven has no way to get the money back. So because it was in her realm of possibilities to do it, and she didn't, this is like a migo, right? She is believed, that's what we're talking about this, because all believability is just because she could have burnt it. That's version number one. Version number two, Ikeda Amre, lo hemne Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman did not believe her. Amale Rav Nachman, v'hai bai kalte, and now he brings exactly what we said, Rav Nachman said to prove his opinion in the first version, turning on amabet, but couldn't she have burned it? To which the answer, a very strange answer, and it's hard to understand what this is, since it was already authorized by the court, she can't say I could have burned it. And it's not a possibility because it was already validated by the court previously. This is a strange answer. So what if it was validated? It could be later. It was paid back and, and then she could claim I burned, she could have burned it. And in other words, it's a weird answer. Some people say because she brought it, and this is maybe a better interpretation, she brought it to court right now and it's here. So at that moment, she can't, what's amigo usually? You could have made a better claim. Well, she has no claim that I burnt it because she's sitting here in court holding the document. Once she brings it, it's already it's a fact on the ground, and then you can't use the fact that she could have burnt it previously as amigo because right now she doesn't have that amigo. Okay, it's a little hard line to understand. The commentaries disagree about how to read it. Okay, that was question number one. Rav Nachman answers it, even if maybe it's not the most satisfactory answer. Rav Nachman, but now he brings another problem, which isn't going to have an answer. Simpon, here's a source, a Tanaitic source. Simpon sheyesh alav edim yitkeim b'chotamat. If you have a receipt, that's a simpon is like a shovar, it's a receipt, which has witnesses signed. So obviously we check the validity of those signatures. If they're valid, then of course you can claim I pay back the money based on that document. But what if ein alav edim, but yotzei mitachat yedei shalish, but it's in the hands of a third party, and the third party claims that it was paid back. Or, in other words, they're holding the shovar. So they're believed to say, here, the shovar is valid. Or if it was written on the shtar itself, underneath the signatures, and then it says, this loan was paid back, on the document itself, kasher. So even if we don't have signatures in either of these cases, we believe it. What do you see here? Now, one was to say the shtar was already paid back, and the other was to say this is a valid receipt. But either which way, you see that this shalish is ne'eman. So tiyuvta to Rav Nachman tiyuvta. This is in fact a problem to Rav Nachman's, the second version of Rav Nachman, that he didn't believe her, because it really does seem that a shalish is believed, a third party. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to go back to our Mishnah. We got a little sidetracked. We're going back to the case of our Mishnah of this raya. Okay, you said, right? And then again, there were four cases. So now we're going to see what Rabbi Yochanan says about this. Now remember, we already quoted Rabbi Yochanan as saying, halacha is like Rashbag in one case, like Chachamim in the other. But let's assume we forgot that right now. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is a good sugya about seeing how the rabbis in Israel would bring the traditions of Israel and what the psikot were to Babylonia. But sometimes there was some confusion about the Masorot, okay, the traditions, what really Rabbi Yochanan said. So when Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he came to Babylonia, he said, Olam mevi ra'aya v'soteo. You can always contradict the rule, bring further proof later on. No statute of limitations until ad sheyistatem tanotav. Now, yistatem tanotav really means until you say, I have no more witnesses. V'yomar kirvu ploni uploni v'hiduni. And then you say, oh, wait, I have witnesses. So now the Gemara says there's a very confusing statement. Hagufa kashya. This is like combining two of the parts of the Mishnah. Amra yistatem tanotav. Atan the Rabbanit. That's the rabbis. Once you say I have no more witnesses, you can't bring any, even if later you find. But Hadar Amart, Kavuish Ploni Ploni B'Yiduni, which was the last case, which is Atan the Rabban Shimon Gamliel, that even Rabbi Shimon Gamliel agrees if all of a sudden out of the blue you just pull out these witnesses, we don't believe you. And that even Rashbag agrees. So you're holding like Rashbag, you're holding like the rabbis. So v'chitem, if you want to suggest that Kula Rashbagu Perusha Kamafare, she really holds like Rashbag, but it's just, what does it mean, Yisatem Tanotav? It means until you're done. It really means until you get to a case where all of a sudden, they're about to finish and you just say, oh, wait, I got someone up my sleeve. My ad Yisatem Tanotav, what does it mean? Ad Yisatem Tanotav, it's not what we thought it meant. Ad Shiamar Kavu Ploni Ploni V'Yiduni. And then that would be basically Rashbag, because it means until that point, you can change it. You can always say, right, I found witnesses in a real way, not in a fake kind of way like this. But you can't say that because we already learned Rabbi Yochanan's approach to this whole thing. He doesn't hold like Rashbag in Ra'aya Achrona. I didn't specify, by the way, what's Ra'aya Achrona? It's this. There's two cases of Ra'ayot or proofs, right? The Mishnah has two cases, and the last one is the one we don't hold like Rashbag. And that's this. V'hama Rabbi Bar Chana Mar Rabbi Yochanan Kol Makom Sheshana Rabbi Shimon Gamliel b'Mishnatenu Alacha Kamotu Chutz Me'arev Tzadam V'Ra'aya Achrona. Meaning we don't hold like him in this case. So it can't be that that's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. So something really doesn't make sense in what Rav Dimi said. So therefore, we had to wait till someone else came and brought the Masorah of the tradition of Rabbi Yochanan. Elakiyata Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda came from Israel to Babylonia. He gave us what Rabbi Yochanan really said. And then this is a little bit different. La'olam mevi raya v'sotel ad shistatem tanotav v'yomru lo have edim v'omer ein li edim have raya v'omer ein li raya. Okay, and then that's really what he says, which is exactly Chachamim in the Raya Achrona. It's until you forget the kirvu ploni or ploni. That's not what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said, until you say, I have no more witnesses. I have no more proofs. At that point, you're done. You cannot come and say anything anymore. You're not going to be believed. However, he adds one important thing, and this goes back to the person who wrote before about Chutz La'aretz. Sorry, I didn't notice who said it, but Aval ba'u edim midinat hayam. If witnesses came from abroad, shaitad disakya shalaviv mufkeret b'yad acher, or there was a satchel of his father's full of documents with lots of proofs, or shovarim, or something like that came later, and he, someone else said, oh, by the way, here, I'm returning this bag of your dad's, and in it, there's all this stuff. So this, again, the sugya ends with this issue of the subjectivity, that it's really, really depends on the situation. Since this is all about believing someone, it really depends on the scenario. So while the Mishnah has these very clear-cut divisions of, when yes, when no, and the Gemara gives a clear psak, which often the Gemara doesn't give, the sugya, starting with the story of the child and ending with this statement of Rabbi Yochanan, is really trying to tell us that it's not so black and white, and there's a lot of gray there. And I think that's what the sugya is telling us. Okay, Ki'ata Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're up to the last issue for our Masechet, which is this issue of can you force the last issue of our Perek chapter, not Masechet, we're not done yet, which is really about trying to figure out, is can somebody force the other side to go to a different court? Okay, and to go to a different court in a different city. Now, if you force someone to go to a different court in a different city, that means they have to pay money, they have to travel, they have to pay for a hotel, an inn or somewhere to stay. So is that fair? Are you allowed to do that? What if the court is a better court outside the city? So that's the big debate here. So again, Rav Dimi is quoting Rabbi Yochanan. So one says, we're going to do it here. And the other one says, no, we're going to the better place, the Makom Avad, where the bigger rabbis are, which is farther. So what happens? You can force the other side to go to the Makom Avad. Now, it sounds like either side, but we're going to see it's not so clear cut. Amar lefanav Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi, Misha nosheva chavero maneh, yotzi maneh al maneh. So Rabbi Elazar says to Rabbi Yochanan, if you lent money to someone, now to get your money back, and you have to go to court because they're not paying you back, you're going to have to pay money to get your money back. That's totally unfair. Here you did something nice for the person you loaned the money, and now you're going to be forced in order to get your money back to go far away and pay money. It doesn't make any sense, right? Yotzi maneh al maneh. You're going to spend 100 to get back your 100. That makes no sense. Eat marnami, right? This is like nowadays when we make people pay for the expenses, right? To reimburse them for their expenses. If someone, if you sue someone or they sued you, depending on the case. So now, Ella kofino tovadam bi'iro. He says, for sure, you can force the other side to stay in town and get ruled there. It marnami amar Rav Safra. Also, it was said that Rav Safra says, Shnaim shenitatzmu bedin. Chadumreni don kan, chadumreni lech lemakom avad, kofino tovadam bi'iro. And he says the same as Rabbi Elazar. You can force them to do it right now, right here. Now, what if they don't know the answer? In other words, the lower court or the local court might not know the answer. So what do? So not make people travel. So they send to somebody else, right? And they send it off to a different court. They write down everything and they send it off. And if one side says to the court, it's a different issue. I want to know why you ruled against me. That person, the litigants are allowed to demand an explanation for what the court did. This is all about transparency in the court. And as I mentioned yesterday, this is what Din and Daf is based on this week, Alana Steinhain's class. Excellent class about transparency in the court. Very interesting because until now, right, remember we started with the don't reveal the secrets as if they're secretive. And now all of a sudden you see that they do have to be transparent if one of the sides demands it. Obviously, it's unclear from the sugya, all the rules here. We also talked about you can't go out and say this one said you're innocent, and I thought we shouldn't convict you, and they thought yes, and what you're allowed to tell, what you're not allowed to tell, and how you're allowed to tell. It's a big deliberation here. There's a lot of opinions. The Yivama, when there's a case of Yibum, she goes to his court. Okay, so he can force her to come to him. She can't force him to come to her. We'll see in a minute why. Ad kama. What are the limits on this, or what, how far? We'll see in a minute what they mean by how far. They don't mean distance. You'll see. Amar Rabbi Ami, afilu mitveria litzipori. Now, Tveria to Tzipori are not so far. So it sounds like they're saying, how far can he make her go? It's not really that. It's that if she lives in Tveria, where they have really great courts and the biggest rabbis are there, and he lives in Tzipori, where there are less prominent rabbis, he can force her to come to his small town of Tzipori rather than do it in Tveria. Amar Rav Kahana, Mikra, where did we get this from? The Karulo Ziknei Iro velo Ziknei Ira, because it says in the Pasuk, the Zikanim of his city and not of her city, and that's where they get it. So that's just learned out from the Torah. Now, if we get back to this thing, so can you force someone to go? Can you not? In a regular case, not the Yavam and Yavama. Amar Amemer Hilchatat Kofino Tovi Elech LeMakom Avad. You can actually force them to go to the bigger Beit Din. Amar Le Rabashi LaMemer V'Hamar Rabbi Elazar Kofino Tovi Dam B'Yiro. But what do you do with Rabbi Elazar? You're ignoring him. He says you have to do in the same city. Here comes the big answer. We've talked about this before. The Love can't force the Malve to go somewhere else. Why is that? Because as soon as the Malve, the creditor, lends someone money, they did them a huge favor. And the Love, who borrowed money, basically indebted himself to the Malve, that he's like a slave, which means that the Malve always has the upper hand. So the Malve can insist that you go to the farther place. But the Love can't insist to take the Malve, the creditor, to a different court. Okay. Now we end with the story. Okay, a situation. Mar Ukva. They sent to Mar Ukva the following letter. L'diziv lekibar Bitya, to the one who has like a shining face like the son of Bitya. Remember, that's Moshe. We talked about that before, that Bitya raised Moshe, and therefore she was called like his mother, Shalom. Okay, so they send this letter to Mar Ukva. He's the head of the Reish Galuta in Babylonia. Ukva Bavli, Kaval Kadmana. Ukva Bavli screamed out before us, Yirmiyah achi havir alai taderech. My brother Yirmiyah did something terrible to me, either monetary, perhaps something else. Whatever it is, he's got a big claim on his brother Yirmiyah. Ve'imrulo, and say to Yirmiyah, who's living in Babylonia, okay, that's why he says Ukva Bavli. By the way, Ukva and Ukva have nothing to do with each other. Ukva Bavli basically came to us in Israel and said, my brother Yirmiyah did this terrible thing to me. So you, the court of Babylonia, go to him, and he and send him off to us in Tveria. So they say, Haguf Kasha, this doesn't make sense. Amart Imrulo. It says, right, did I say send them to us? Right, in Tveria. So it says, Imrulo, Amadainu Atun. If it says you tell him, that means you're in charge. You have jurisdiction. You rule again. You do the judgment. You say, bring him to Tveria, that means bring him to Israel. So is the Babylonians supposed to rule him? Eretz Israel? It's like saying it's a total contradiction. Those are mutually exclusive. So Ela Hachikamri, we're going to have two answers, and with that, we're going to end today. Hachikamri, Amrule Dainu Atum, Itzayit, Ilo Hisiu V'Yurpanei B'Tveria. Obviously, the court in Tveria must have been greater, or at least so thought the Israelis, right? So they said, listen, you judge him. If he listens, great. If he doesn't, then send him over to us in Israel, and we'll judge him. Because remember, the brother was in Israel. Rav Ashi Amar Dine Knesot Hava Ubavel Lo Dine Dine Knesot. They said you have to bring it to Israel because it was a knas. Whatever he did was something that caused a penalty. Penalties you can't do in Babylonia because there's no smicha. We learned about that. Now, why they say you tell him as if like you judge him? Well, they didn't want to step on Marukva's feet, so they said it like in a nice way, like you judge him, but really we're the ones who have to do it. So you send him over to us. Okay, so two ways of understanding what that meant, and that was all about because can you force someone to go to a different court or not? And with that, Hadran al we finished the chapter. So what we did today was a lot of different topics. We started with the contradiction in the bedikot, talked about the unique opinion of Nehardea on what that's based on. Then we got to we went back to this issue of revealing secrets and telling things you shouldn't be telling. We went to the Mishnah of at what point can you all of a sudden bring a proof that you didn't have before, and got back to issues of believability. And then we finished with the issues of going to the Makom Avad. Can you force someone to go to a higher court or not? And within that, we also got to transparency of the court. How much does the court have to be transparent about what they've done? And with that, we finished for today, finished our chapter, and wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shnishma B'Sorot Tovot. We'll see what the week brings.